You just hired someone great and now they're gone. But before you blame the candidate, let's talk about your leadership style and how that may impact their decision. We're talking about why employees quit fast next on Crossroads and Catalyst. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalyst, the podcast with Shanita B. I am your host. This is where we discuss the thoughtful, wise, and strategic perspective at a crossroads can be the catalyst for change. Today, we are trying to jump into the phenomenon as to why employees quit. Good employees that you took your hard earned resources, you recruited, you went through the interview process, and before you realize it, they've decided this is just not the job for them. Why is this happening? This is definitely something that we want to address. And you might recall I did an episode on this just a couple of weeks ago, episode 21, and it discusses it from the employee side. Today, we're discussing it from the leadership side because definitely there are two sides to every situation. And we want to talk about how a leadership style can impact a decision that an employee makes on whether or not to stay or to leave within that first 90 days, because this is something that can be problematic. And if you know someone who is experiencing this, share this episode with them because this is definitely something that we want to try to alleviate and prevent from happening. And if we as leaders can do that, then it behooves us to exercise whatever talents and skills that we can to this so that we can overcome this type of situation. So you got the new hire in, and as with anything else, everybody is really excited that first day because you have some really high expectations. You've gone through the process and you recognize that there's talent and skills that this particular person can bring to your organization to contribute something of great value, and they think the same. And that first day is great. They're super excited. But then a few weeks in, you start to recognize that they're detached and disengaged, and they might even have a deer in headlights look because they're just overwhelmed with what they're seeing and experiencing. And they may not even really know how to express what they're thinking and feeling because of the level of work or maybe the level of disorder that they're experiencing, if in fact that's what it is. And then before you know it, by the time day 30 comes around, they've already submitted a resignation notice and they have completely checked out. And so they're done. So, what is it that's causing this? Well, we're definitely going to get into some of those things, but I want to talk about some of the stats because I've seen some stats that indicate the percentages at which this happens. So, approximately 30% of employees quit within the first 90 days. And I saw this stat on nectarhr.com, I believe. That's a lot of people that quit within the first 90 days. And then when you take it a step further and you start to quantify the costs that are associated with that, well, it's another 30% of a new hire's salary is what it costs to replace them. So if you're hiring somebody at $100,000, it's going to cost you almost $30,000 or more to replace them. That gets very expensive, not to mention the drain that it might place on your other employees who may be taking on the additional work and could be causing some issues there because now you're getting into a situation where they may be overworked and approaching burnout as a result of carrying on these additional duties. So it really takes a toll on everyone involved, not to mention if you have an HR department that you're working with, they're continuing to spend their time and resources. It's just impactful to a lot of people. And this is why I wanted to talk about this because I'm sure you probably know some people who have gone through this. I certainly have, and I'll share a little bit about that momentarily. So let's get some clarity around some of the reasons as to why we think this is happening because leaders have one perspective, the employee has another perspective, and the two apparently are at odds, which is why you ultimately have a situation where an employee has decided, you know what, I'm out of here. I got to go. Okay, so here are some reasons that I think are at the top of the list. Okay, lack of onboarding structure. This is one reason why employees might be leaving because they don't think that they have experienced or been granted an experience to assist them with acclimating themselves to their new job in this new organization. Definitely can be a problem. Another item, poor communication or expectations. So if information is not being conveyed to the new hire, to the new employee, in a way that they can understand, that's definitely going to come back to bite you. Because if they start to recognize that this is a pattern of behavior that they will not be able to overcome, they don't really have any reason to stick around and try to make it any better, because they recognize that this is probably a system that might be in place. And who wants to come in and try to battle all of these different things, especially if they're already having difficulty with the work itself? What about a cultural mismatch? Have you ever taken a new job and you thought that the culture was going to be a great fit, and then you get in and you start to look around and you recognize, oh wait, this is not at all what I anticipated? Well, this happens pretty much on a regular basis, and some people decide, hey, I'm not sticking around for it. And then you also have micromanagement. So, and I'm going to say this one is an extreme. You can either have the micromanagement on the one end of the spectrum, and then you can have the other end of the spectrum where there's just total neglect. So maybe that you discussed in the interview, well, this is my leadership style, and it's the polar opposite of what they actually experience once they get into the role. Completely, completely a decent enough reason for somebody to question whether or not they want to stick around. And if it's way too much, they just decided it's not worth it to do so. And then you also have some unaddressed red flags when it comes to the team dynamics. So maybe this person is hired in and they're working on a team, and they get in and they start to quickly realize, oh, wait, we've got some gossipers here, or we got some slackers who just don't do their work. They just kind of show up and pass their work along and pretend like they're assisting, but really everybody else is doing the work. If if someone new comes into a team like this and they have a background or a history where they've worked with other teams and organizations where this kind of thing was just not the norm, they're not going to put up with that type of behavior, especially if they're the ones who are going to be on the brunt end of receiving all of this extra work, because maybe there are people on the team who just, they don't do their work, they just pass it off and pretend like they do. These are things that have to be addressed, and they actually speak directly to your leadership style, because they recognize, well, if they're not willing to address some of these problems, they're probably not going to address any of the other concerns that I might have in relation to my work. I'm not doing that either. So then what kind of choices do we have when it comes to how do we address this, and how do we rather, as leaders, address these types of things so that we can prevent these fast quitting type scenarios? Number one, these are some things that you can do. Be honest about the work. And I think that this starts in the interview process. Anytime you're interviewing someone, you want to be as honest as possible to help people make an informed decision about the job. Everybody is trying to figure out if this is going to be a good fit. And the only way to do that is to be honest and let them know that this is the type of work that you're going to be doing. This is the type of team. This is the type of culture. And this is some background. This is what you're going to find when you step into this new role. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're probably going to find that you're going to continue to have a high level of turnover in a particular role, because what you have expressed to them does not match what they're seeing in actuality. And it's going to be completely up to you as to whether or not you're able to challenge that and nip it in the bud, or if you're just going to continue to go in circles, well, basically stay on that hamster wheel, because that's really what it comes down to. Number two, start before day one. You want to plan out an onboarding process that makes that new employee feel welcomed, that helps them to understand what the expectations are. When are they supposed to check in? With whom are they supposed to check in? What are the expectations for them as they prepare to start their new role? I think that it's really important to make contact and to stay in contact. And this does not mean that you have to talk to someone every day, but you just want to basically make sure that everything is is on schedule, because if there, especially if there's a long lead time between the time that they were hired and that, or accepted rather, and the time that they're going to start that new position, you just want to make sure that they have some touch points available to help them to understand that yes, uh, We are still here. We're really looking forward to having you come and join our team and our organization. And this is what we do to help ease the mind of this new hire. Because starting a new job is stressful, and having a new employee start is rather stressful. So if there's anything that you can do to try to mitigate that, you want to do that. Number three, make the first 30 days a priority. And by that, what you want to do is you want to lay out that this is what we're looking to see over the course of the next 30 days. Because if they understand that there are some expectations or some a checklist that they can work through, well, that's going to be extremely helpful because then they know, okay, I have this on my list. This is what I should be working toward. And I'll have the opportunity to share this information and get some feedback and share some feedback with my manager because they're ultimately going to be checking in with me as well. So that'll definitely be very helpful. Number five, make sure that you ask for feedback and that you listen to the feedback that they have to give to you. And this is one of the things that I would say that you want to ask. You want to ask them, is what you're seeing and experiencing, is this representative of what was shared with you in the interview? Because the more you can understand about how you convey information in an interview, that means that you are setting realistic expectations for the employee. If they tell you yes, then that's great. But if they tell you no, well, then you recognize you need to probe a little further so that you can better understand what you could have done to help the employee or the candidate even to understand the type of work that they're gonna be doing and what the expectations are. And then finally, ensure that they have the appropriate level of support and resources to carry out their duties. If an employee does not feel like they have support and resources to do their jobs, you're going to have a difficult time hanging on to them because they're going to completely start to disengage and they're not going to be interested because they recognize that they're climbing an uphill battle. And if they were not aware that this was going to be a part of their job, they just assume would just quit and leave it behind and go start somewhere else, or even return to the job that they had prior to starting with you because this is how serious this is. If they don't know that they can get what they need to do it, what's the point in trying? Is what a lot of people are saying. And this has everything to do with how you lead and how you convey information to them to help them to understand what is available, how they can do it, and if they can even learn how to utilize the systems that they already have. So those things are extremely important. And all of this reminds me of my own experience with scenario like this because I've had an employee that quit within the first 30 days. And while I can tell you I was not completely shocked about it, it was very disheartening and disappointing, especially considering the type of role that this was. This was a pretty high level position. And at the time of the interview, I knew that there was information that I needed to convey. And so I did my best to convey that information. But I was also new to the organization. So I didn't even know the depth of, I guess, lack of resources and documentation that was required to assist someone with doing the job. And I could tell, I could see the change. I could see it in this person's face that something was awry. And we were having regular conversations, regular meetings, so that we could touch base with one another. I started with a checklist to say, "Hey, this is what I would like for you to focus on within the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days." And I gave that information to this person so that they were aware that this is the track that we want you to get on. And we were having regular conversations when he started. But again, going back to even the interview stage, I let him know, hey, we're going to have a lot of challenges here. And I don't know the depth of them, but it's going to require a lot of work. But I believe that you have the skills that we need to help us to get to the next step, to document processes, to bring some order. And I think that once they got into the role, they started to see, oh, this is far beyond even my own expectations. And by the time we got to 30 days, we were having a conversation, and I asked the question directly, hey, should I expect to receive a resignation from you? And he told me yes. And I couldn't blame him. I tried to talk him out. I tried to give him every opportunity to work this out, and there was just nothing that I could do to recover this particular employee. And it made me, like I said, it actually made me sad because I recognized that there was there was much more that needed to be shared. And because I didn't know enough about the role, being very new myself, there was nothing that I could do about it. And I asked specifically, hey, do you think that there was anything else that I could have shared with you? And he actually told me no, that there was nothing else that I could have shared with him. Some things people you have to see in order to do a good assessment. But it was helpful to me to recognize that there was nothing else that I could have said differently or shown him differently in the interview stage, because some things they are difficult to convey to people in an interview. Short of them coming in and doing the work and walking through things prior to the hire date, they may not be able to get a full understanding of what's required until they get there. And sometimes that's just the risk that you have to take. But if you're aware of these things and there are steps that you can take to try to mitigate that, it will help you in the long term, because then you will have a better chance of finding the right fit for a particular role. And then you're not finding that you have to go through the process, because it's, again, it's expensive. And if you're in an organization that does not have a lot of financial resources to spend in that way, you definitely want to be as honest and transparent as possible and help people to think through what kind of situation that they're going to encounter and ask themselves if they really want to do that thing. So it's going to say a lot about you just as much as it might say about that new hire, about what happens within that first 30 days, which will either help to retain them and keep them on board, or you're actually helping to push them out the door. So do what you can and be transparent and honest with people in that regard. And we are at the end of today's episode, and I trust that you found this information helpful and that it will cause you to rethink how you approach your interview processes, your onboarding processes, and even doing assessments on your team dynamics to make sure that your team is a welcoming environment for a new hire. There are things that we can do to try to mitigate this, and there sometimes it's just completely out of our hands. But if there's something that is in our court that we should handle, we should go for it and we should nip it in the bud before it becomes completely problematic and causes us to have to go through these turnover issues, because none of us really wants to have to deal with that. Leadership is personal, and this episode is calling us to be a better leader. So do something about it, and don't let another talented new hire, walk out the door. We're at the end of our conversation, so be wise, be thoughtful, and be strategic. And remember, crossroads reveal who you are, catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters. So make it count. Talk to you next week.